changing space. Oceans of opportunity so fast, transforming the unknown future's cast. A testament to diversity's power, their achievements shining by the hour. Decades of recognition, change us with no challenges and innovation in every song. Honor we stand as beacons, guiding light, facing the unknown, fighting the good fight. Fighting the good with tales captivating, they'll inspire us all. Lighting a fire, breaking down every wall. Lessons learned, life stands intertwined. In this vibrant journey, success they've defined. Decades of recognition, change us with no challenges and innovation in every song. Honor we stand as beacons, guiding light, facing the unknown, fighting the good fight. Fighting the good
Else I would like to.
I think they have to do that.
No. Okay. So before Stephanie joins us, we can start with the introductions. So I would like to hear from you all, your names and which industry you are from. Awesome, awesome. And I would also want a line on where do you see yourself in 5 years? You know, let's
She
break
giving
some
out homework.
like.
I really want to get into data analytics, and I want to also kind of be someone that is in charge of like diversity and inclusion. So I'm thinking about getting my MBA, and I'm trying to figure out like how exactly I should do that so that I can be seen as someone that can be in a leadership position and not just like a computer like behind a desk.
Technology. Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. Thank you for that. Yeah. Should I pass on the mic?
No,
like,
just the mic.
or
Listen,
you
we
can
have
use
to
the mic.
the mic.
You want to go next?
It's Windsor. Hi.
Hi, myself Hema Shinde. I'm here with Infosys Limited. Right now, I'm working as a technical test lead, and my client is PwC. So I wanted to be kind of go for the management level and managing project management and all that. So right now, I'm working with the auditing firms and tax department, work for the projects, for the testing related stuff and all that. So that's all I have.
Interesting. Good. All the best for your project management aspirations.
Hi, my name is Wilma Davis, and I'm a staff software development engineer at Bell Flight Textron. And we build the flight simulators. So
Wow.
to train the pilots in military and commercial. So we build trainers to train Army pilots, Air Force pilots, Marine pilots, everything. In addition to police departments. train them how to use the Bell helicopters that they use for their
Wow.
jobs. So that's my name, where I'm from, and where I see myself in 5 years. I am really close to the end of my career. I'm on the back end. I'll probably have 3 to 5 years to go for retirement. I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in computer science, AI, ML, neural networks. So I'm highly interested in what you have to say. So I see myself being a college teacher, instructor, or professor in about 5 years. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome, incredible.
Hello, my name is Yuritsa Chan. I'm currently an engineering project manager at Apple. I work with a lot of back-end engineers. Let's see, what was the other question? Where I see myself?
No,
in
no,
5 years?
where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Got you. I actually want to change my career path, so I'm looking into becoming a UI UX designer. Graphic design and just like UI design has always been a passion of mine, a hobby. So I had a taste of it during a career rotation, and now I'm trying to look into potentially going into that role. And I'm really interested in AI just because I want to see how it could help designers and also potentially help during the design thinking process. So
Very
really
interesting.
interested to hear what y'all say.
Awesome, awesome. What were the questions? I missed them. So give us your introduction, a name, your background, which company you are from, and where do you want to see yourself in 5 years?
Okay, hello, I'm Nadine Gibson. I'm a student at Wellesley College in Boston. And where I see myself in 5 years, I am right at the beginning of everything. So where I see myself in 5 years changes on a daily, hourly, minutely basis. And so I just feel so much excitement to approach and explore everything that comes my way, learning about, AI pathways, learning about sort of back-end management pathways and everything. But I know that in 5 years, ideally, I would love to be in a collaborative space with people and excited to get my career started.
Awesome, interesting, very interesting. Thanks for that. Parneet?
Hi, good afternoon. So my name is Paneet, and down the line, 5 years, I would want to see myself in the technical role. It could be a widespread role. So I don't want to go into the management side where I have to manage people, because I'm not the one who can say, do this, do that, what's the deadline? So I don't want to be that kind of. I know there are good managers, right? But being my personality, I want to
Go to the core.
yeah, I want to be in the team and work collaboratively. So being in the technical line, I want to see what more roles I can make, vertically, like, yeah.
Awesome. Architect.
Yes.
Yes, becoming the tech architect.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Thank
All the best with that.
Thank you.
I'm in a completely different area. I'm a banker with Leah Taylor. I'm a banker with JP Morgan in the private bank. So we just started to introduce LLM. We have an internal LLM for the firm that I have yet to use, and I'm just trying to understand more about AI.
Interesting.
And I know diversity is important because a lot of this data is based upon people who don't look like us. So I'm just curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Stephanie, come up. Yeah. Sandra, we would love to hear from you. Yes. By the way, Sandra is from Infosys. I mean, she doesn't need any introduction at Infosys, but since we are here, I'll ask her to introduce, and then, I'll leave the stage to you to introduce.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's still morning. I'm Sandra Jackson. I work for Infosys, and I think the question was, where do I want to be in 5 years? An entrepreneur owning my own company as the CEO.
And Sandra is a big D&I champion at Infosys, and she's the reason why Infosys is here and why all of us are here from Infosys, So an applause to her. There's a lot of effort, hard work that goes into running this around, and from the organization standpoint, Infosys is how many? 3 lakh employees, and then all the way from the application process to getting here in person is like, yeah. And then not just this, so many other things beyond that. 300,000. 300,000.
Hi, good morning. My name is Regina Gambrell. I work for Pratt & Whitney, where I'm currently a continuous improvement manager. Where I see myself in 5 years is helping with strategy, with transformation, whether that's digital business process operations. I'm really here because my husband is actually getting his master's degree in AI, so I'll have some conversation I can take back to talk to him about.
Some nighttime conversation you can take back from here. Okay.
I'm Zori. I'm in the Army. I do EW cyber projects.
Because you definitely projected in the room.
Yep. My name's Zori. In the U.S. Army, I do EW cyber projects. So 5 years from now, just rank up and continue what I'm doing. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll go with you.
Good morning. My name is Aditi Prabhu, and I work for Textron Aviation. I'm a senior design artist, and I work on the AR, VR section of designing the private airplanes. And we are trying to figure out how to use AI in our design thinking and how we can improve our productivity as well as the presentation we give to our customers. So it'll be wonderful to hear what you have to say.
Interesting, very interesting. And I want to also hear, where do you see yourself 5 years?
Oh, yes. I would still like to be an individual contributor, but include more of the technology to make the work, the whole work stream better for our company.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, all the best for that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Jordan Page Player. I'm currently in a transitionary period where I just moved back home, but I was most recently a research microbiologist. I'm looking to go into plant biology, so I hope to get my master's and PhD within the next 5 years, and hopefully end up at the USDA in one of their departments as a plant biologist.
Interesting. All the best for your PhD.
Thank you.
I'm Jama Vetter from Navarre, and see, I just made a new job change starting in about 30 days. So in 5 years, I'll probably still be there, maybe in a director role instead of the deputy at this point. So.
All the best for that. Thank you, everyone, for the introductions. Hope I have not missed anyone. Okay, all right. So let's get started. So good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all having a fantastic time at the conference and have been absorbing all the wealth of information that so many leaders have been sharing with us all. Now, I'm thrilled to see so many brilliant and trailblazing minds that are gathered in this room as well. So let's dive into the topic that is not just shaping the future, but actually redefining it. Inclusive intelligence, the imperative of diversity in AI. So let's be honest, AI is no longer a trend. It is transforming how we work, live, and make decisions. Our everyday life is impacted with it. You know, AI has become deeply ingrained in the world. But what is important is who is building it. It matters who builds now more than ever. So we are here to explore how diversity is not just a nice to have, but must have for creating ethical, unbiased, and responsible AI that serves everyone. So today I'm joined by our esteemed panelists, Stephanie and Dr. Keisha, and myself, Manvi Sharma, your moderator for the session. You know, I will start with quick introduction about myself, and then I'll pass on to Keisha and Stephanie for their introductions. So I come from a strong engineering and financial background. I have close to 18 years of experience, all through at Infosys, and primarily have been serving Wall Street and custodian banks as my clients. You know, I'm a mom of two, a half marathon runner, aspirant to be a full marathon runner 5 years down the line. You know, so that's about me. I'll move on to.
So good, I guess, yeah, finally afternoon is noon now. So good afternoon, everyone. And again, I appreciate you guys playing along and introducing yourselves as well. It does help with the dynamic in the room. So I am Keisha Cutts. I am with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I have been with the Corps of Engineers for 25 years this year. I'm a civil engineer by degree, but I also have an MBA and a doctorate in management. So it gives me opportunity to do a few different things. I currently work as a program manager for our medical program. I don't currently do AI, so my intent here is to give you the perspective of how AI is impacting us as a government organization.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephanie Vaughn. I am a computer science instructor here in Detroit. I've worked with a number of nonprofits that provide computer science and coding instruction to Detroit public school students in Detroit and the metro area. My background is a little different. I do come from a STEM family, like mostly medicine and engineering, but I decided to be the black sheep and major in journalism. And so I tried that for a while and it wasn't really working. So I decided to, I went to school in Chicago and then I lived there for until 2015, and then I came back to Detroit to kind of start over and recalibrate, and that's how I kind of got into computer science. I did a coding boot camp, and while I was looking for my first like real developer job, I was teaching, and it just kind of found my niche that way. And so I found my passion in speaking about things like bias and ethics in AI, and also equitable internet access. So I do a lot of speaking and advocacy around those topics as well.
Thank you for that, Stephanie and Keisha. So before we get started to learn and collaborate and understand the full potential of inclusive intelligence, I have some housekeeping items to read, which is mandatory. So I'll just get started with that. So keep your new WOC friends and connections close. Sign up now for the call-in AI chat and keep the conversation going long after the lights of Women of Conference fades. All the attendees are requested to have their badges scanned. I'm sure that they are doing that. So only the scanned badges will be counted towards CEU PDH credits and for attendee tracking. All the attendees are requested to register online at the Morgan State University table or scan the QR code and follow directions at the room monitor table outside your session. Attendees are also requested to complete the conference survey. A link will be sent to them post-conference. Feedback is important for the conference planners to enhance future conferences. The PowerPoint slides will be posted after the conference and can be viewed at www.slideshare.net/ccgmag. STEM City Chat. So you can join the all year long STEM City Chat, which is at https://stemcityusa.com to continue the chat. Remember to stay in touch with the other Women of Conference attendees by downloading the WOC app available under Career Communications Group in the iPhone App Store or Google Play Store. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/WOCITC, and follow on Twitter, X, @WOC Technology, x.com/WOC Technology. Okay? So yeah, with this, I hand it over to Stephanie, to walk us through the interesting presentation and give us her perspective on how inclusive intelligence is shaping the future of AI.
All right, thank you, Manvi.
These are the slides like this forward. This is like backslide.
Oh, I'm doing the slides. Okay, great. Thank you. So this is just my overview. The purpose of this talk is to examine how all of the efforts to move artificial intelligence forward are largely built on statistical biases and why the people who build them should care. Because as it was pointed out, AI has become very prominent in our lives in many ways, in ways that we see and ways that we often don't see. And with that comes, unfortunately, biases that also impact our lives in ways that we see and that we don't see. And so I want to look a little bit closer at what that looks like and talk about what ethics should look like. Unfortunately, you can't really see the graphic here, but this is just kind of a very brief.
You want to hand out?
Oh, no, these are my notes, sorry. This is just a brief overview of what artificial intelligence is versus machine learning. I didn't want to assume anybody's level. I just wanted to like make sure I meet everybody where they are. And so if maybe you are new to AI or not really familiar, just knowing the difference. The main difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning is that artificial intelligence is programmed by developers, but also informed by data models, whereas machine learning, it's not programmed. It essentially learns from the user's behavior and builds predictions based on that behavior. That's a really, I guess, that's a very like ground level explanation. It goes a lot deeper than that, but like I said, I just wanted to keep it fairly simple for now. Unfortunately, I was told that the video won't play, so there was a very short video that was going to do like an overview, so unfortunately I have to skip that. Yeah, I embedded it in the PowerPoint, but they're saying it didn't work, so unfortunately. But you can see, I guess if you want to look it up, it's called Artificial Intelligence, How Does It Work? And it's by Duke University. And it's like 1 minute and 40 seconds. It's really short. So like I apologize. I wasn't, you know, technology, yay. All right, so the main questions that we want to look at here are, do developers have an ethical responsibility when building tech that could potentially become a tool of state violence? And also, should developers have a say in how the tech that they build is used, particularly after it's delivered to the client? And so the first question is about ethical responsibility of developers. And so first I want to define state violence. And so this is just a kind of a long definition: acts of violence committed by an official state, military or sponsored by a sovereign government outside of context of declared war. And so we're working with that definition moving forward. And so I want to put this in the context of, I want to put state violence in the context of facial recognition, which is something that, you know, we have used or are at least familiar with. So hopefully this is able to resonate with you all. So there's an organization called Data for Black Lives, and they are a group of activists, organizers, and scientists, mathematicians that are committed to the mission of using data science to create concrete and measurable change in the lives of Black people. And they actually are having a conference in November, if I'm not mistaken, if you want to look up more about them. But they do really great work, and so I wanted to highlight one of the conversations that they had at a conference that they held a few years ago. So there was a panel called Abolition in the Age of Big Data, and where they talked about where when we think about facial recognition, we maybe think of like the crime shows like, you know, CSI or Law and Order, when they find a suspect and like, you know, they have a picture and they're trying to find a match. But so law enforcement does use facial recognition to identify suspects, but most of the time the databases are populated with things like driver's license photos or passport photos, but some law enforcement jurisdictions actually use mugshots for their facial recognition databases. And we'll talk a little bit about how that can be a little problematic. So just think about the implications of when your law enforcement database is populated with mugshots. That in and of itself is problematic, but if you think about what happens when you are identified, but what happens if you're misidentified? Because very often with facial recognition, when it fails, it doesn't fail to identify, it will misidentify. And as you may or may not know, it has been, I want to say, addressed as AI has become more prominent, that facial recognition has trouble recognizing faces and facial features of people with darker skin and identifying gender in between male and female and with people with darker complexions. And so if you, for example, have a law enforcement database that is populated with mugshots and it fails and it misidentifies, then if you think about a misidentification, that can be as bad as a positive ID. Because what happens if the person can't afford bail, if there is bail? And that comes with its own set of problems. So then you have somebody who has been misidentified by this facial recognition database for something that they didn't do, and now they're in jail, waiting for their trial, and then, you know, what happens? They lose their job, they may lose their home, if they have children, lose custody of their children, and then like the problems just kind of mount up. And very often you have people taking plea deals just because so they can get out of jail because of the bail situation. So it kind of, it can snowball pretty quickly. And so that's why something like this is not just problematic, but that's why I'm including it in it as an example of state violence, because this is something that the state is using that in turn can become used as a tool of violence against citizens. Need to go to the next slide. And so, you know, for areas with issues around problematic policing, facial recognition databases will mostly contain mugshots of Black and brown faces. That's the other part that I wanted to mention. Sorry, I was talking, I wasn't even going through my slides, so I need to catch up. So underneath it all, high arrest rates are what are being rewarded, whether or not the arrests are accurate or true, because the priority is to, you know, report numbers to the city or the state, rather than maintaining the commitment to the well-being of the communities that, you know, they're serving. And so this is a quote that stood out to me: "Technology in the hands of those in power will continue to be used to oppress." And so moving on to the next question, should developers have a say in tech, how the tech they build is used once it's delivered to the client? And this is a quote from an open letter from a number of scientists and researchers who were expressing concern that facial recognition tech that Amazon had developed that had a high margin of error in identifying faces, particularly faces with darker complexions, was being sold to law enforcement. And they put out an open letter saying that, you know, Amazon should stop selling to law enforcement due to the impact and the implications of everything that we just talked about so far. And if I'm not mistaken, I know that there was a lot of back and forth about it, because you can see this from 2019. This was a lot of back and forth about it, and there was a lot of like back and forth with the board, and they voted on it, but I don't think they ever actually like pulled it or stopped selling it, unfortunately. And so back to looking at the implications of developers who build something that becomes a tool of state violence. This is an illustration that I thought was really cool. It's not by me, this is someone else, another Stephanie. It's an illustration of a talk given by a man named Caleb Thompson. It was called "Don't Get Distracted." And he talked about his experience working for the Department of Defense. He had a contract where he was building something ultimately to locate Wi-Fi signals. And eventually they kept asking him, does it find phones? And then he thought it was kind of strange, like, why did they want me to find Wi-Fi on phones? Until he finally realized that they wanted to locate Wi-Fi that was on phones because they were trying to locate people using those phones so they could kill them. And so once he had that realization, he just talked really in depth about how it affected him and when he realized what he was doing, and his dilemma with doing work that he loved but knowing ultimately that it was being used to harm people, and how did he reconcile that. And so I'm gonna find a quote. He said, all of the cool problems we were solving, finding nodes, speeding things up, making more accurate predictions. It was also cool and so much fun. I hadn't thought about why we were putting all this work into finding a better place to get good Wi-Fi. It doesn't even make sense if you look at it for more than a few seconds. Does it find phones? It was never about finding better Wi-Fi. We were always finding phones. Phones carried by people. I remember I said I was working for the Department of Defense contractor. The DoD is the military. I was building a tool for the military to find people based on where their phones were, and shoot them. And so obviously this is an extreme example of code being used in a way that the creator did not intend. It's a living example of what developers everywhere are faced with when they're hired to build something for a client. And you can also look up this talk if you want to see the whole thing. He's done it over a few different conferences, and I'm pretty sure you can find it on YouTube. And so I want to talk a little bit about why should we have a code of ethics in software development, and how should we approach ethics in software development. Because after talking about all of that, to bring it all together, this is about ethics and how we can approach it, and what are the best ways to maybe implement it. And these are just very open questions. I'm not exploring like what to do, just exploring how we can arrive at these answers. And so obviously this is something that can be discussed more in the Q&A. Yep. So if you just think about it, we spend the majority of our time working, and so why wouldn't you want to be thoughtful and intentional about something that you put the majority of your time and energy into? And this is a quote from a colleague of mine who also speaks about this topic very passionately, very eloquently, and she was someone that I wanted to get her insight on this particular topic. She's also a software developer. And so if you think about it, most professionals have ethics standards and guidelines. Doctors have the Hippocratic Oath. Lawyers take an oath to follow ethical rules of the jurisdiction where they're licensed. Reporters swear by the journalist creed. And so the fact that software development in the scheme of professions is relatively new, the lack of a code of ethics shouldn't be taken for granted. And so people who are practicing the software development shouldn't take the lack of a code of ethics for granted. It's not needed any less, because software impacts our lives in as much as going to a doctor or seeking counsel from a lawyer. And to that point, our doctors use software doctors are using software during their visits. Lawyers are using software to do their jobs, so everybody's using software. And so that's also going to impact the work that they do. Sorry, I got ahead of my slides again. And so approaching a code of ethics, we should strive for transparency, meaning open source, so not owned by any private entity. democratically controlled, and built by teams that are representative of the world that we live in. And that's all I have.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks for those inputs, Stephanie. Really insightful. You know, I would just like to add one more example. One of the HR company or one of the IT companies started using an AI-built app for selecting the resumes for a particular job description per se. Let's say HR was using it for recruitment purpose, an AI-developed app. Over a period of time, they realized that the AI-built app was screening and shortlisting only male resumes. You know, they were like more than 80%, 90%. So these are like subtle biases that get built onto the AI applications. And it is all because probably they are relying on a prehistoric data. And maybe the prehistoric data was biased. You know, so it's not necessarily a human or a software developer could be injecting those biases in it. You know, maybe the model is training on the historical data. And all of the historical data that has been present till date on which these AI models are training themselves, that data can itself be biased. You know, hence there is this importance that has come. I think most of the companies and organizations are trying to follow. They are building this practice of responsible AI. You know, you need to have ethics around it. You need to have a diverse community building your software and a diverse team so that there are some decisions, judgments, and those kind of actions, which probably we'll explore more in Q&A, that can be built into having the ethics built into the models. Okay, with this, we move to our Q&A round, and my first question would be to Keisha. So, Keisha, how do you think organizations measure the effectiveness of their efforts to reduce bias in AI systems?
So again, let me caveat before I answer the question. I do work for the Army, but I must say that I am representing a civilian employee's perception of this program. I do not speak for the U.S. Army. So I have to say that first, okay? In thinking about that question, Ms. Stephanie kind of addressed the fact that there are things already in place, right? So the White House already has the White House Office of Science and Technology. It outlines principles aimed at the prevention of algorithmic discrimination, right? So those things already exist. But what we have to focus on is remembering that the measurement piece has to be intentional and timely, right? So there's guidelines to how you do it, but how you measure it, you first have to be intentional and timely as associated with who is being impacted, right? So you can't measure something, the effectiveness, if you don't know who you're measuring against. So you have to know who's being impacted, and you have to go to those individuals. We talked about biases being sometimes not inherent biases, but you won't know until I ask you how you were impacted, because what might be biased to you may not be biased to someone else. So the industry has to recognize that even though there's ways to ensure that you're trying to minimize and mitigate those biases, you have to ensure that you're targeting the people who are impacted. So what was it built for? And now how are the people who it was being built for, how were they affected? So that you can see if there were biases that you knew potentially were there or additional biases in there. So the only way that you can measure is against, again, the person who was supposed to be affected positively to see if they were impacted negatively.
Okay. No, valid point, valid point. My next question is for Stephanie. Stephanie, what governance structures should be in place to ensure that AI algorithms remain fair, accountable, and transparent?
I've been thinking about this question a lot, and it made me go back to a story that was reported in like 2019 about it's a joint venture between Harvard and Yale, an AI ethics kind of organization, and they awarded $750,000 in grants to projects that were, or to people who were building things to kind of introduce ethics into AI, or, things that were making trying to fight against like misinformation and disinformation. And so I don't want to sound cynical when I say this, but I just feel like incentives being money, because if companies are incentivized to do something, then when money is involved, then they're going to be more likely to do it, because right now there's not really an incentive to have ethics in place.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously incentives and
Maybe penalties.
yes, and penalties.
You know.
So incentives and penalties, which can come about in any number of ways, whether it's through the government or if there's a governing body that is, like there's the Bar Association for Lawyers, and if a lawyer is found being in violation of something, they lose their license, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So.
Got it. Okay. Moving on, Keisha, what do you think? What roles should regulatory bodies play in enforcing diversity standards in AI development and deployment? And we would also want an answer. What do you think Army would do?
So I think this kind of goes along the line of the question that Ms. Stephanie just answered. So the governing bodies, again, will depend on a number of things. I think which goes to a couple of questions that we have. It depends on what we're governing and why, right? So you have to remember that in the climate that we're in, what right looks like, is not the same for everyone. And so we have to determine, what are we trying to regulate? We understand that this is the future. AI is the future. It is what's going to happen. So what are we actually trying to regulate? Are we trying to regulate what we can't do, or what we actually can do? And so I think not necessarily being clear on the parameters for what we're actually trying to govern is the reason why we haven't quite gotten to what right looks like for the governance opportunities, because we don't want to limit before we actually innovate. And I think that goes to one of the other questions as well. So we want to be as innovative as possible. And if you put a limitation on that innovation, then why are we trying to do innovation anyway? And so the generic answer as a government agency, we always want to protect our stakeholders, which is the U.S. people, right?
Yep.
So we want to protect them, but from what? And again, it goes back to understanding who are we protecting and why we're protecting them. And so because we don't have that answer quite yet, I think in many instances is why it's kind of not been standardized and structured the way that we think governance bodies should.
Okay. All right. Valid perspective.
I think we have a question on the back.
The question that comes to mind is, I'm in the banking industry, which is a heavily regulated industry. We have lots of regulations around discrimination, okay? And, you can't discriminate in providing loans or credit cards or whatever, so why can't we have, a similar focus around discrimination for this technology, for this AI, that you cannot discriminate, around resumes, around opportunity. I just don't understand why we can't use all this. We have whole buildings full of people that regulate the banking industry, and I think we know how to regulate around discrimination. I think that's a great place to start.
Thank you.
I agree also, but I think it goes back to the programming of AI. When those things aren't intentional, those things aren't inherent, and because they aren't necessarily intentional or inherent, we go along the line that is the intent, right? It's not built on the surface. It's not built for the intent to be discriminatory, but when we do learn that there are limitations, there are things, the limitations to facial recognition associated with pigmentation, then we have to regroup and readjust. But we go in with the mindset right now that the intent, on the surface, the intent to use this is not for harm, and so we have to go back and adjust. So how do we regulate, again, something we don't know until we know it? But perfect point. I get exactly. I agree. And so diversity and inclusion, the thought of diversity and inclusion is why we're saying we're going with AI, because it limits supposedly the human error.
All right, so then to her point, so the way I understand with the AI, like I'll use my daughter as an example. When she started out, pink was her favorite color. So everything, actually rainbow was her color. Then she went through a phase where pink was her color. So if I took that data and I put it into the language, my large language model for my kid, and I told it, help me find a toy or find an outfit for her, it would have come out rainbow or pink. She's not into pink anymore. She's not into rainbow. She is into purple and blue. That data that I pull out is no longer going to be correct. It wasn't, I'm not trying to be biased in her gift and getting her something pink. It's just the data that I have. The problem we have right now, and I am not fully in the AI space, it's just what I've been reading, is that we don't have enough diverse people using the AI tool. In some cases, they're afraid of it because of the advertising and the information that's coming out. And in some cases, they're just not aware that it's there. But by simply having someone different going and using AI, we can change the model, because everything we're putting in is creating the next generation of the AI tool. So we here have to go and use it. We have to go in and put something in there. Don't put your personal data, because we learned that from some of the other talks, but the way you ask your question, the way you're doing your prompt engineering, where you're talking about your background and the fact that you're from a street and you're using slang and other colloquialism that the AI is not familiar with, that is going to change the AI so that we can bring in that diversity without trying to regulate everything. We can regulate all we want, but if the people are not putting the data in, we're not going to get that change. That's it.
Yep, absolutely. Good point, valid point. Okay. Stephanie, so what do you think, to what extent you believe that diverse data sets can address the deeper systemic biases that in AI development?
This is a tricky question, but I'll do my best to answer it. I always think about, whenever I try to explain bias in AI to people, I usually will use the example with the automatic faucets. Because if you've ever tried to use an automatic faucet, as Black people, a lot of times it won't work. It's gotten a little better over time, but when they first, when they were first a thing, like, you would stick your hand under and it wouldn't work, because essentially what was happening was, it was the data models that it was using were not programmed using darker skin. It was only programmed to recognize like lighter complexions. And so it was literally not recognizing that your hand is there. And so once we come across information like that, just like Keisha was pointing out, like, we don't know until we know, there have been lots of advocacy around, especially around when AI becomes biased in ways that are dangerous, like with the facial recognition example. Then it becomes a matter of, how do we fix this with our with the data that we do have? Are we introducing new data, or are we trying to improve the data that we're already using? And so I think introducing more diverse data models, I don't know about systemically, but I do know that we are giving away more data than ever, just in our day-to-day lives with the apps that we use and websites that we visit. There are, cookies tracking our internet activity, and so I think it's up to the people that build it to actually implement all of that data for something besides trying to sell us something, because all of that data is just used to try and sell us things. So we have this wealth of data at their disposal that I don't think is being used in ways that are actually benefiting people. So addressing the systemic part, I would like to think that we can, given the amount of data that we have. It's just a matter of somebody actually taking the initiative to do it.
Got it. Thank you for that. Before I move on to the next question, which is for Keisha, I want to tell you all, Keisha has been very busy for last couple of weeks handling the hurricane situation that has happened. I want her to share her perspective from that point of view, what it has been and how Army, pulls through all of these whatever disaster is there, and Army gets into that recovery mode. I mean, sometimes the impact is only said to be limited, and it actually turns out to be bigger impact. So what is it, and what is it for us to learn and take back? So how is it that you come to action?
So I think right now we're doing a lot of imaging and modeling, mapping. We're doing a lot of mapping with the use of AI right now. So for us, it helps us with some of our recovery missions. So we can use some of that AI technology that we have to do investigations and assessments before we actually go into those disaster relief efforts. So it's growing, it's developing. We, as a civilian organization, have limited access to it so far. I don't know if the actual uniform service uses it in a different way, but again, it's a developing thing for us. So it's not our front line right now. We're people, right? We want to go out and get in and get our hands dirty as a civilian organization, but we are definitely using our ERDIC, our test and research centers are definitely developing some of that technology for use, but we haven't used a lot of it outside of just kind of mapping and data imagery. Do you have anything you might want to add from the? Okay, yeah, thank you.
Got it. Thanks for that. Okay. So how do you see intersection of AI ethics and diversity playing a role in future AI governance frameworks?
So I've read somewhere that ethics is going to outlive laws. Right? We are human beings, and how we feel, ethics is core to us. It's our feelings, it's innate to us. And so no matter what laws there are, we're going to change because we as people change, we as people grow, and specific to us as an organization, as a government organization, we can start working towards what we believe. We're putting information into these systems based on the current culture, the current workplace environment, the current ethical ethos that we believe is valid and true. But when the political climate changes, that also changes, right? So I think that intersection is always going to be a battle between the laws that might be in place and what we currently feel looks right for us right now. And so again, that's a hard question. We start talking about ethics because ethics is me, it's core to me, and I try to surround myself with those people that have that same similar ethical values. But when the world changes, what right looks like might then change. And then again, so we always have to use the input that we have to evaluate it. So again, how well are we doing? And based on people who are impacted by it, and then have to re-input stuff back into the system. And so it's always going to be that cyclical experience.
True that. Okay. Stephanie, can a lack of diversity in AI teams lead to a blind spot in terms of recognizing potential ethical issues, and how do you think this can be addressed?
Well, I think we see plenty of examples of blind spots, like your example with the HR software picking only male candidates. And so I think blind spots can appear anywhere there isn't diversity, whether it's racial diversity or gender diversity or just any kind of anywhere there's homogeneity, there's going to be blind spots. What was the second half of the question? Sorry.
So how can this be addressed? Or probably I'll ask a different follow-up question. Do you think self-regulation within AI development teams is sufficient, or are there external audits which are necessary and mandatory to ensure ethical AI practices?
Well, I guess based on what I've seen, I'm not sure if there are very many self-regulatory practices in place with AI companies, because it just seems like every you're always finding out about something new that they're creating that does something. You're like, why would you do that? Or, who is this for? And so I definitely think that there needs to be outside regulation, because I don't think companies, like we were talking about incentives, they're not incentivized to do it themselves. So they're essentially waiting until there are some kind of penalties or consequences for doing what they do.
Okay, all right. Keisha, if you have to teach an AI system the nuance of diversity when the term itself often gets lost in translation among humans, what would be your, points? How would you go about it?
So I think it goes back to defining and testing. What is the intent? Again, what is the intent? Why are we doing it? I think if we understand why we're doing it and we use the data set that we currently have, again, some of these questions kind of overlap, right? So I can't teach you what I don't know. I can't train you to overcome a challenge if I don't recognize that the challenge is there. And so understanding that the concept of diversity and inclusion is a nuance in AI is always going to be plan, do, check, act, right? I'm a PM, right? So we plan it, we do it, and then we check, is it working? And if it is, we keep doing it, and if it isn't, we change it and we act and make it better. And so that's what it's always gonna have to be with this. We're always gonna have to have some type of internal self-regulation, and then we're gonna have to have a body outside, because at this point, we high-five and we did good, but you see something that we missed. So you're always gonna also have to have an external checks and balance system as well. And so this concept within is a new concept, and we don't have it quite right.
Yep.
And I don't know if we'll ever have it quite right, because it's always going to be changing, and that's what diversity really is, right? It's a stagnant, because people are different, people are changing. Who we're impacting, why we're doing is always gonna change. And so again, I feel like my answers are the same. It's a cyclical cycle, right? You have to, it's continuous improvement. Again, I keep going back to these PM terms. If you're not a PMP, get your PMP, right? Continuous improvement, and that's what we're gonna have to do in this effort.
Okay. No, we'll take that back, like it requires continuous improvement, and as people's definition of ethics and all this changes, it has to be taken back time to time. Okay, Stephanie, if AI is the future, how do we make sure it doesn't inherit all the bad habits of its creators?
This is interesting, because I feel like because in a lot of ways it has inherited a lot of the bad habits of its creators. So, because I'm just thinking about art tools like Midjourney, or I can't remember the other one, the AI art tools that are. Yeah, Dolly. Yeah, so what are they doing? You're creating art, but it's essentially populated from using art from artists that they're not being credited or compensated, and then and the people who built it knew that going in. So not inheriting the biases, I think, relies upon having something in place to move around those biases. Like the previous question, like having kind of internal self-regulation, but also the external, saying these are things we don't want to do, so moving forward, let's not do them. But like I said, there has to be incentive for them to do that in the first place, because so much of AI seems to be built on theft, whether it's the large language models and something writing a paper for you that's taking something that was written by somebody else, basically plagiarizing, or whether it's an art application that is using artists' work that without their permission and without compensating them. So I think it just comes back to the question about internal self-regulation and external regulations, or not even regulations, just external, I don't want to say watchdogs. Just external monitoring, maybe. Yeah, checks and balances, and then incentives. We just, make it worth their while so that they want to follow the rules.
So I think, can I just add to that real quick? So when we talk about incentives, right, so what is an incentive and what does right look like for each individual, I think is also problematic, right? Because culturally, right? So as we look at this as a global issue, in some cultures, there's certain things that is acceptable in business practices that may not be acceptable in other cultures. And so if I say, that's not right, don't do it, it's like, well, why? That's a standard practice. That's how we do it. So we can't just say, because ultimately in this business, again, the thought is that we're doing it for the good of everyone, right? This is going to make the world a better place. But what does that better place look like for each individual? Sometimes it's extremely hard to kind of narrow down, because for me, what right looks like might not look like for somewhere else. So how do I incentivize you? You should just want to do good, right? You should just want to be a good person. But what does that mean to you versus what it means to me? And that piece, that incentivizing piece, is extremely difficult when you don't necessarily have those parameters, because we're trying to feed that to a machine, not a human. And again, it goes back to that piece.
I'll take your question.
So both of your comments got me to thinking how, especially when you start focusing on the art realm, is how do you balance creativity with evolution, and what role it is in terms of reskilling. What should creativity be now that we have AI?
It's a good question, right? I think, and so one of the other questions that we had that we were going to kind of skip is talking about innovation, right? And how do you, we want to keep being innovative. We want to keep it being innovative, but we want to make sure that we have DEI as a part of it, right? So how do we do that? How do we make sure? And I think the best part, the only way that we can do that is to have that as our core responsibility, right? So it goes back to the comments that we were having. We have to make sure that we believe in diversity and inclusion within our organizations, and our organizations look like what we want our AI products to produce, right? So if I have a diversified group of people who go in not only looking different, but thinking different, having different experiences, they're going to be able to ensure that we're considering different things and that our products are going to reflect that. And so without that as the core, without DEI as a core, without the intent to do well, be incentivized by just doing good and servicing and doing the best for as many people as we can, without that initially, the output is going to be difficult.
Agree to that. Okay, this would be my last question to Stephanie. So how can bias mitigation in AI be integrated into AI training at educational level itself to foster a more conscious generation of AI developers?
I hear this conversation happening a lot about just this push for STEM education. I'm not saying it's bad, of course it's needed, especially in the United States, because globally we're kind of behind when it comes to STEM education, but it also needs to come with just a healthy dose of humanities, so that people can know how to build things, but also understand like the consequences of building those things, knowing historical context, knowing whether it's sociology or just basic communication, psychology. I'm not saying this is like a foolproof to prevent bias, but at least making people aware, because maybe when they're building something, and if you don't have a diverse team to point out and say like, hey, this is a problem, or maybe we shouldn't do this, at least you'll have some kind of context going in, like, this is what happened the last time somebody tried something like this. How can we do this differently? Okay, I see we've got 10 minutes. And so I don't know, I wish I had a more like technical or like concrete answer, but I just feel strongly that people are lacking just the humanity aspect of development. We make things for humans, but the humanity is lost in a lot of ways in how it's used.
Thanks for that point of view. So with this, we'll open to any more questions that you want to ask around this topic
Or comments.
or comments.
I've learned in my studies that there have been some attempts at creating some corrected word embeddings that the LLMs use. For example, I think one was a phrase association. Man is to computer programmer as woman is to housekeeper or homemaker. So right there is sexism right there. So, and I do recall there was a lady named Robin Spear who tried to do something like, I think it was ConceptNet, to improve the word associations, because your generative pre-trained transformers use these word embeddings. So, and then they go out and train on the internet, right? Get all this data. It's a web crawler, right? And it reflects our society, and we have a lot of bias in our society already. So I think Robin Spear's attempt was to look at those embeddings and somehow correct them and somehow do that. So I guess I was interested in what you guys knew about that, or efforts like that to improve the data that these models are getting trained on. I don't know that it is, but I do know newspapers, Washington Post, sometimes emails, and a lot of times we put negative connotations in our emails to people.
Yep.
So I think AI is reflecting our society in general. So
It is.
it is a hard thing to try and correct. So I just want to get your thoughts on that. So thanks.
Yeah, so I think Ms. Stephanie kind of started trying to address when you talked the question about our bad habits into what we program into these AI tools. I'm not a programmer. So I don't know that. I actually wrote that down to go look that up, right? So because I'm not familiar with that effort, specific effort. But I do know that there are a number of tools and opportunities where in our research and development centers where they are, in fact, again, doing that checks and balances for things that once things are discovered, right? So unfortunately, it is a discovery. This is just one of those things where it's a hard lesson learned sometime in discovery. Sometimes things go bad with this before we recognize it sometimes. And I think the nature of this is why it makes it so discussion worthy and why people are so fearful of it, because we're worried that we're going to have an aha moment after there's a disaster. And so I think conversations like this help generate more thought. Again, the diversity of thought that will allow us to be better in ensuring that some of these testing is done before our real world application causes concern.
Yeah. I would like to add some points to that. You know, men reading that statement will not even like get that perspective that this is like biased, you know, and it is like women who bring this up, like was a biased statement that is coming out from the model or coming out from the AI. So we definitely need to have women on board on these models, building the code on these teams, that whoever is leading the AI team for your organization or the responsible AI team for your project and all. We definitely need to have those diversified views, because only then the viewpoint gets to the forefront of the system. A man would read the statement not to like, I mean, yeah. So they would not even like pose this or probably think of it as like objectified or a sexist statement.
Right, and I did want to mention that example, and then there was another example that really struck me with the computer vision, you know, image classification. So, you know, you're like you said, it could always determine facial recognition of lighter skin, right? But one instance where they put a black face there, and it actually classified it as a gorilla. As a gorilla. So that really is, that bothers me, and I really think we need to really, you know, get to the bottom of this and perhaps just improve the data that's out there that these models are getting trained on. And I don't know, like Google, I was just in the Google session over there. I wasn't sure how much these models get maybe Stephanie can answer this, how often do they get retrained? Because I think you said sometimes the data is out of date. You know, the data goes out of date, and I just wonder how in an industry, how many times do these models get retrained, or how do they know it's time to get retrained? Thanks.
So, okay, sorry.
You go ahead, Stephanie.
I'll say, because actually I wanted to bring this up, there is an organization called Algorithmic Justice League. It was founded by a woman named Joy Bolamwini. She does amazing work around this. It started because she was doing okay, 5 minutes. It started because she was trying to use facial recognition on a camera, and it didn't see her face, but then she put on a white mask, and then it recognized her face, and then that just kind of sent her, and she was already at MIT studying, so she actually pivoted into doing studies on bias in facial recognition. And so, one, that was to answer your question about are there anybody that's trying to like address this. That's one organization that is working towards it, but also as far as like how often they update their data, a lot of times it's not until a study comes out. It's too late, you know, not until a study comes out and says like, hey, you know, this facial recognition has a really high margin of error for people with darker skin. So sometimes it's just not until, you know, a study or maybe even they get some feedback. So I can't, and I don't work for Google, so I can't, you know.
Yeah. However, some of the data, some of the models which are actually being used for the financial organizations, they get trained on a daily basis. Anytime you have an anomaly or an outlier that has come in, immediately the data gets trained on that anomaly and absorbing it into the data set and probably giving you an output. So it depends on the organization. Some of these public organizations, maybe the data model is taking longer to train, but for smaller, or let's say I'm a bank and I'm training my models, it gets trained on an everyday basis, because what I see, an anomaly data that has come in today, probably by tomorrow it will start giving, my model will train itself, unless and until I mark that that was an anomaly, ignore that data. Don't train on that input. You know, so I mean, someone is there sitting there and calling that out, that this was an anomaly data, don't train on the input, so that the data model doesn't start reflecting that.
Hi, I'm Shekinah again. I just wanted to say first that when you were talking about having more of like humanities and sociology or psychology integrated in like our studies for computer science students, I thought that was a really good idea, because although it's not like that at my university, because I do go to an HBCU, but I have been in other like areas. Like I was in the Apple College Support Program. I was only Black woman. I was the only woman in my team, and they are like not like they're all just computers. Yeah, like they don't really think about the humanities part. So I thought that was a good point. And also to what you guys are speaking about with the facial recognition, we had working with Apple, we had multiple customers say still, like especially dark-skinned customers, and it's men and women, where they can't even get their facial recognition set up because it doesn't recognize their face, and we go in like different lightings and everything, and it doesn't work. But question I had was, speaking about research, about like everything you guys know, are there any platforms that you guys know that I could look at to specifically research these things? Because I've done research before, but just to where it's narrowed down specifically like to AI and like DEI, and making sure that there's not a lot of like bias and discrimination in the algorithms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I Googled a lot. So yeah, we did, you know, there's a lot of different
yeah, you can probably
data.
get in touch with Stephanie on LinkedIn, and she will recommend some pieces. And you can get in touch with me as well. I will also share across some of these links.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so I would like to give, any more questions? No. Okay.
Out of time.
So I would like to give my vote of thanks. Thank you so much for joining this insightful session today. We had a great chance to deep dive into the valuable perspectives. We do understand that the data is biased. The society has been carrying those biases, and there's no escape from it. So, but yeah, let's shape the future of AI, and some very interesting takeaways. A big thank you to our speakers for the expertise, and for all of you for engaging with us and all the thoughtful questions. So let's continue to push the boundaries and collaborate towards a smarter and more inclusive environment. Thank you.